Hey everybody, how you doing? I'm Paz, rising VTuber and artist, and today we are going to be drawing something for Art Fight. The person who I've picked for today is somebody we actually, I don't think actually, I got the idea to draw them when they rated in a few, actually it's been like 3 weeks now. Oh Jesus, look at that. I have to take a quick look at the old Twitch activity feed, but yeah, it's Civ. I haven't had a lot of chance to actually talk to Civ. I mostly know Civ through Raph, my friend who is also a knight. But they seem like a cool guy, and he's also an artist. It seems like I like the design a lot, so we'll be going into that. I'm also realizing just now that I forgot to post the Go Live announcements, so I should probably do that real quick. I got two main struggles in my life when it comes to VTubing. Like, a lot of people who struggle with like VTuber stuff, a lot of what they struggle with is, oh, what content should I create? What should I focus on? How could I grow? My main struggle in VTubing is fucking deciding on what I should call my streams and what I should put in my stream promo announcements. Like, look at the title on this stream right now. I sound like a cooking channel. This is untenable. This is unsustainable, even. I don't know that much about soup. I'm not going to be able to keep this bit up forever. But yeah. In terms of what I wanted to... or what I thought would be the best way to approach this is that I thought I should grab the masculine body type. Where is it? Oh, here we go. Just bump that a little bit. Would have rated you had I been a few seconds longer. Also tomatoes in any soup, huh? In most soups. I feel like in most soups. Because the thing is that, I mean, the thing about tomatoes that nobody really tells you growing up is that, you know, monosodium glutamate, MSG, that thing that makes most savory foods taste better. So MSG, that glutamate or glutaic acid maybe. Anyway, there's a special compound that in tomatoes that when concentrated basically makes MSG. So whenever you put tomatoes into any savory dish, what that basically does is that it basically adds like a small dose of MSG to whatever you're cooking. And in soups, this resulted in being much richer, much more savory, much more everything. I threw some red wine and vegetable broth into the one that I made today, and it's incredible. I had some just before stream. All these look a little bit too aloof. I need one that's a little bit more active, I think. Let's see. It really is a sign of the times, or, you know, a sign of like what the person who made these was going through. When you look at because all of these blue and dark blue ones, or I guess blue and light blue ones that you see here, these are all from the same creator and you can tell because again they look very similar. And I just kind of want to check something real quick. Yeah, no, like, a lot of the ones that are for, like, the feminine model, they have the character on their tippy toes, which means that they're meant to be made with heels, which is always really funny to me. I don't know, whenever I see that happen, I just remember the fucking art of Rob Liefeld, which, to clarify, sucks. Like, Rob Liefeld, I don't know, maybe he's gotten better about it, maybe he hasn't. But basically, Rob Liefeld was infamous for a long, long time for sucking at drawing comic book art. Professionally, granted that. And a notable thing that he did was that even when women were bare feet, he would draw them like walking in heels. And this was very, very noticeable. Like, you're gonna draw somebody getting out of a pool, and they're supposed to be walking like on their tippy toes. People are gonna know you only know how to draw people in high heels, bro. I'm kind of feeling this pose, honestly. Because, like I said, the rest of these are a little bit too... I don't know, actually. I saw a commission of them with the Dragon Slayer from Berserk up on the reference sheet. So maybe a big sword. Wasn't that one character from Night Rain? Didn't they have the big sword? Hang on. Night Rain big sword character. I don't fucking know anything about Night Rain. I'm gonna be real. I haven't even played Elden Ring properly. Hang on. Reopen closed tab. And the funniest part is that it was like this really frail looking one too. Like she did not look like she was supposed to be, what do you call it, like swinging all that around. Maybe in the classes thing? Hang on, let me open up the web browser source so y'all can take a peek in there with me. I love what I'm looking through. Hang on, character Nightfarers. I think that's gonna be the one. Not you, not you, not... Oh, you. I think. Yeah, I think this is the one. I think she's the one with the huge sword. Let's see, level yada yada yada. That's the cosmetics. Where's your sword? Hang on. Equipment, weapons. Maybe just weapons is the right place to start. Heavy thrusting swords, curved great swords. Come on, where's the really big one? Ah, is this the one? Colossal swords. That's a ticket. Come on, show me a gallery with it. Show me. There has to be like a gallery with this shit. Hang on. Also, I have my caps lock on, but honestly, it is funnier when I search stuff up with caps lock on. Night Rain Colossal Sword. Huh. Nothing? I mean, no, there is this, but like that's not really fitting the vibe of the character. Oh, this one's kind of cool. Okay, this is kind of a cool stance, actually. Can I get like a higher res reference for these, maybe? No? Troll Knight, Watchdog. And of course a good old-fashioned Swaghandar. Let's see. May Gallery? List of all swords, all items gallery, maybe? Maybe somewhere around there. Godslayer's Greatsword. All these are such cool names. What the hell? You know what? This one's sufficient. Let's use that. I don't know. At the end of the day, I really am just a you know, for as much as it's been overplayed and as much as, you know, I feel like society has advanced past it, and as much as I am a martial arts guy at the end of the day, I do always have a soft spot for just huge swords. I think most people do, but honestly, there is just something to be said for watching a fictional character just lug around a massive piece of metal, sometimes bigger than themselves, and just whack people with it. Wait, hang on. This one's actually nice and simple. I'm gonna go with this one. This one's just called the Great Sword. Reminds me a little bit how you can call basically any sword a bastard sword, since the whole thing of the bastard sword is that it's like using more than one style of swordsmithing thing, I think. Like, the reason it was called that is because it was both good at thrusting and slashing. Let's see. If I'm using the greatsword, then maybe I don't even need to stick to the sword poses from there. I do wonder when the day is going to come that I'm going to put somebody in a suplex position like this. Because I have the poses nice and ready and loaded to go. Started thinking about if your shape is optimal, inoptimal for dodge rolling. Ended up wondering how a person could try using Sonic likes in the Souls-like genre. How we doing? I mean, I think we're doing alright. Huh, Sonic and a Souls-like. I think you might run into some issues there because I feel like the main, shall we say, bread and butter of the Sonic games are the ability to feel like you're a fast little guy against something very big. And the thing about the Souls-like games is that you are fast, but not faster than whatever's attacking you, and that's why there's so much emphasis on like the dodging and the rolling, and the dodge rolling thereof. In terms of trying to combine the aesthetics, though, I do feel like Hollow Knight is probably the closest bet we have, right? Like, I do feel like that's a very close fusion of the visual signifiers of like the older Sonic games. You know, very round little guy, very fun shapes and blobs and everything, even though it is supposed to be a much more serious story. You know, from what I understand, the plot of Hollow Knight is something like the world is decaying and you are a funny little bug who is trying to make their way around. I could be wrong. I've been wrong about a lot of things. Yeah, my best guess would be to make a... It'd almost be sort of like a rhythm game, but in reverse. Rather than trying to run so you hit, you know, move your fingers quickly so you can hit the notes, it'd be more like you're trying to dodge the notes. The only thing that I can think of is like in Sonic Unleashed when you could like quickly sidestep from one lane to another to dodge obstacles. Is King Arthur Sonic a Souls-like? It ain't a Souls-like until there's a dodge roll and a stamina meter. I've seen that one guy on YouTube dig through Steam for Souls-like games. I know what the genre is about. What I might actually do real quick. First of all, I need to get rid of the drop shadow on the sword. That's gonna be very distracting if I leave it there. It is crazy that they kind of just unleashed Sonic and the Black Knight on an unsuspecting public sometime in the mid-2010s. Okay, let's do that. Or actually, no, never mind. This is good. Okay. So now we're gonna get to do something fun, which is try and figure out the best way to create a good line of action for this. Because I've found like the issue with using the 3D models is that I end up doing a lot of the poses and everything much stiffer than I normally would. So I need to really amp up the kind of motion that is implied here in order to compensate. I need to go crazy style on the motion. I need to go crazy style on the motion. Me when I'm the lead engineer behind the Nintendo Wii. I have been hearing a lot of good stuff about Model after hearing about arcs and lines of motion, so I should arch my back. God. You know what? I don't think that would help, but I still think you should try. I think that would be the best way to do it, because I think like sometimes you really do just need to give people the freedom to try shit out. You know, see if they can intuit something that you can't from the outside. Like that's a thing that I've thought of a lot of different times, is that sometimes in order to make the best movement, it's not that you need like a super precise direction, but you also need a degree of freedom to do what comes natural, because otherwise it ends up very stiff. So if the model's like, you know what, I think this would look cool if I arched my back, I think you should let them arch their back. I don't see what the harm in it could be. You know, unless that's like some kind of, I don't know, some kind of strange mudra that they've accomplished, and it's going to like unleash a Pandora's box of random bullshit upon your studio. But the chances of that happening are become slimmer every day. But they're never zero. Maybe not like that. The middle part of the armor here comes up like right into where the scarf cloak should be. Luckily, the face helmet is very easy to draw because it's just like a head-on perspective. Watch me eat my words in like 5 minutes, and I'll be struggling with like drawing the proportions of the helmet. It's comically funny to me that the only time that I regularly use or consume alcoholic beverages is when I've bought something to cook with. Because yesterday I went out to buy some wine for making soup with, and again, I used it today. Really good little bit of flavor to add to the soup. And, you know, while I was there, I was like, you know what? I'm going to get myself a lager beer, because I remember trying to make a soup with that one time and it didn't go so great. But you know what? I have some much better ingredients I'm working with. I should be much more capable of using it this time. I'm going to take a leap of faith on myself. I'm going to gamble on myself, and I'm going to bet that I'm not going to screw it up this time. And while I was going through the liquor store, I was like, well, you know, they have some imported sake here, and I did get those merchandise goods from Hololive for was it Ina's birthday? No, I think she just ended up partnering with like Sake Boys, and she ended up releasing like a small sake bottle and cup. I was actually quite worried that those wouldn't ever arrive properly, because I read in the like, there was like a tweet that was published by the merchandise producers that warned overseas customers that in a lot of cases they aren't able to export the liquor properly, because it doesn't, like, there's like much more legal paperwork to do over exporting liquor, and because of that, a lot of the liquor international shipments are just plain outright stopped. International liquor sampler set. A little bit, honestly. I got myself 2 different types of sake red wine that called itself Big Friggin' Red, and a dark lager for myself. So that it would be a pretty good selection if I was intending to drink all of them. but I'm not. I'm planning to use 2 of them for soup, and I got the 2 different types of sake. They were pretty. I've only drank one of them so far. The what do you call? I looked this up yesterday. Basically, it's just water. It's like the most basic type of sake that's like just water and rice that is distilled. But this one had a little bit of not it wasn't like fully filtered, so there were still like little bits of like the sake leaves roaming around back in there. Oh wait, is this a pointed line? Oh shoot, it might be. So apparently it's supposed to be a little bit milder. I know sake leaves are supposed to be fairly sweet. But then again, I've never had them before properly, so it's hard for me to judge. Plus, the taste of the alcohol is very strong. I'm still not really used to dealing with alcohol. But this was like one 300 milliliter bottle, and it was 15% ABV, which I found out yesterday isn't particularly high. I did feel a little bit woozy after getting through the bottle, but honestly, it wore off in like half an hour. I'm sure nothing weird happened during that time. I did end up watching like a Project Zomboid YouTube video though, which is uncharacteristic for me. I played that game once when I was doing some stuff with my friend Leov and a buddy of his, Marks, I believe his name was. We were doing a Halloween stream, I believe. Shadow Path's coming out. Yeah, no. It would be funny that if, like, my ugly side of alcohol story is that I suddenly got really deep into Project Zomboid modding. I could live with that. That seems relatively benign if somewhat of a time-intensive activity. There's worse things I could get into recreationally. I could be getting into a trading card game. So, all things said, modded gameplay isn't particularly dangerous or frivolous. Okay, so this is gonna kind of come out like this. Drunken Fist type evil clone fighter. God. Drunken Fist Pabs is just unbelievably cracked at Magic the Gathering for whatever reason, and then he just never comes back out. Are there actually... I know that there are... I remember seeing this thread in Reddit of darts players who are like, no cap, I throw better when I'm a little bit high. Like, I went on mushrooms and I tripled my personal best. What the hell is happening? And, like, I'm wondering if that's me for certain things. I don't generally dabble in psychoactive or... most substances, really. Like most of my vices are related to caffeine, so I do wonder if there might be some kind of untapped hidden potential hidden within me that's only going to come out when I show it the ugly side of alcohol. Hey, Lev. Did you get sloppy? Not sloppy per se. Maybe a little bit, like, I don't know, what's less than sloppy but still like not. I got a little unkempt. I got slightly unkempt. Sloppy would be pushing it, I think. Sloppy would be doing a disservice to what actually happened. It went away after like half an hour, and I woke up the next morning, and I woke up today feeling basically fine. One of those cartoon episodes where a character gets split into 6 different aspects of their personality, except it's red wine pabs, soju pabs, and lager pabs. What was the occasion for the sake? The occasion was that I bought sake. Well, no, okay. So the occasion was that I was looking around for or normal sake to buy to use like for a merch set because okay, I'm going to go heavy into making soups, right? Because I have all those fucking frozen bags of vegetables from the last time I made soup, and I need to get through those because I didn't blanch them. And so if I dilly-dally for too long, they're going to go bad in my freezer. So I'm like, all right, if we're going to do this, we're going to do this right. Going to get myself some red wine, maybe a lager, to make a soup with, and it's going to be great. It's going to be delicious. While I was at the liquor store, I also wanted to pick up some sake because I had bought some merchandise that included like a little sake bottle and a sake drinking cup. And for some reason, I'm really attached to the idea of drinking sake that has been like warmed a little bit out of the sake little sake serving container and the little cup. So I swing by the international section of the liquor store. And in there are like 3 different types of sake. There are actually several different types of sake, but 3 from one specific brand. And one of them was like the unfiltered one that said it tastes great either chilled or warmed, so I got that one. But while I was there, I also saw one that had like, oh, very refreshing, crisp, sweet. And I was like, okay, that sounds kind of neat. What's that one about? And it's from the same company. It was called like Junmai something or other. The one that I bought for warming is called Junmai Sake, which I think just means like it's just water and rice that has been distilled. So it's going to be a little bit like unflavored. I might actually throw a couple of apple slices or some shit in there before I drink it. But the other one was like slightly unfiltered, so it still had some of the sake leaves. I should drink my last bit like that. Nice. Yeah, I don't know. It's just like a very romantic idea to me. Just drinking a little bit of warmed sake. You know, it's like mulled wine. You don't necessarily know if you're gonna like it, but on paper it sounds great. You know, like spice with fruits and cinnamon and all that. Warmed, really warms you up. I'm hearing these and I'm like nodding along and I'm liking the idea. Anyway, I did finish the slightly unfiltered Junmai Sake yesterday, and I didn't really get the sweetness or like the whatever notes that they were talking about. Ate it with some pizza. It was all right. Fun little drinking experience for me, who barely has drinking experience of any kind. So, you know, this isn't the start of the Pab Sommelier arc, but it was like a nice little memory. We should have a little drinky the next time we hang out. I think that would be fun. Sure, why not? Okay. Okay. God knows I will need I'm in med student hell right now. Oh. Things are picking up, huh? Hang in there. But yeah, I hope things don't I hope that the busy period is relatively short for you. And if it isn't, well, I hope you manage to cope with it. Might not be the appropriate word to use this. I hope you adapt quickly. It won't be. Hope you adapt quickly, bud. I hope it gets it's easy to adapt to. But I got this rice guy on my screen, and that seems good. Aw, thank you. God, I'm imagining me just like I'm kind of imagining me like in your pocket during like one of the medical student exams, just like whispering you, maybe not the right answer, but definitely like like you'll be like, what's the answer to this one? I'm like the the capital of the Czech Republic was Krakow. I'm gonna be of no help. I don't know much about about matters of medicine. God, there's gonna at some point there's gonna be like a wind up right pab stall, and I'm gonna be able to like I'm gonna have over like 10 funny different little phrases, and all of them will be just like random ass trivia that is unverifiable. Emotional support pab stall. God, like you're gonna pull the string on my back, and and my little doll self will be like, "There was once a king of Siam," and that's gonna be it. Okay, that foot doesn't look right. Let's try something else. Okay, yep, I'm liking that so far. Wait, I can... Why aren't... Well, hang on, why am I not doing this? Oh, it's already... The toes are already bent. Huh, okay. You know what, if that's the case, actually, why not just kind of rotate the whole leg to kind of fit the vision here? No, that looks wrong. That looks better. Yeah, there's definitely something missing from back here. Okay, this side is gonna come up like this. I actually saved myself a lot of the trouble of drawing the more detailed arm here. Just mostly gonna be the hand. It reminds me a little bit of when I was drawing the thumbnails for Bloodstained Ritual of the Night, and I drew that second one with the ninja samurai guy voiced by David Hayter. I don't know if it's more appropriate to call him a ninja or a samurai. He did seem to have like very ninja techniques to him. Okay, then over here. Okay. Let's add the other greave here. Something like this. Yeah, that seems about right. Hmm. Oh, wait, you know what I realized we could probably do to make this look more dynamic? There's a perspective setting on the 3D models you can do. So hang on, if I go to the camera settings and I increase the perspective and bring this guy a little bit closer. Look at how much cooler that looks. Shit, I should have really done that from the start, huh? Oh well, too late for regrets. Although I would like to be able to see his arm. Actually, hang on, just real quick. Could we maybe angle this to be... I mean, that's how... The kind of balls of the feet are already planted on the ground. So maybe what we could do is actually move the whole foot up a little bit? Okay, it's already as far up as it can be. We might be cooked a little bit here with in regards to the pose. Might have to just redo the Great Sword PNG here. On the bright side, thanks to the foreshortening, now the sword will look much bigger once I scale it properly. That might be a bit much. Hang on. Alright, first let's... okay, no, that's actually... It would actually need to be a little bit smaller first. Because it needs to fit... The grip would need to comfortably fit in one of the hands. Then we can use foreshortening a little bit. Unless... maybe that's not the right decision, though. Or maybe it is? Hang on. I think something that I didn't account for was the fact that the handle actually shrinks when I apply the perspective here. So I'd have to kind of keep doing micro adjustments to it. That reminds me, this would be the second huge sword drawing that I've done this art fight. Because the first one that I did was for that one person who had that, you know, that small child with a huge sword. Okay, here's what we're gonna do. We're going to almost do like a sort of transplant for the areas that do work. Because, like, this part still works pretty well. Except for the part with the top part. The little hair bits here. The arm should still be salvageable as well. But yeah, for that other kid with a huge sword, what I actually did is that I ended up looking at animations from Monster Hunter and trying to use those as reference for what the pose should look like. Because if there's one thing I know about Monster Hunter, it's that there's a huge jobber in there called like Rathalos or some shit, and two, there is a big sword in it. You got dudes running around with swords bigger than the bodies, swords bigger than their zip code, swords bigger than some countries on Earth. And they wield it in such a way that you're able to maintain your suspension of disbelief. Or maybe it almost reinforces it. That's a very interesting question, come to think of it. If you Because like if you think about it, right? These are huge monsters that you're fighting. So that's already kind of stretching your suspension of disbelief. But it's actually easier to believe then that you could also use an appropriately big sword to take them down. Right? Because like if you were trying to, hunt them with like a normal sized sword, you'd be like, all right, bullshit. No way a tiny little sword, unless we're like going for the eye or something, ain't no way the tiny little sword is gonna take down something that big. Just saw what you're drawing right now. Looks fun to draw, right? That's actually something that I've been thinking about recently. That because I have more time to stream and I have more capacity to draw the things that I want to draw, I do think it is important to like figure out what makes drawing fun for me. Because I think, and I think I've been getting a lot of that this art fight, and it's first of all having a good plan, so I don't feel like I'm floundering in the first few stages of it. I don't have a clear vision for what it should be. Like that's something that I'm gonna have to work on for myself. I also really like how the top half of this came out. Because that's what I've noticed is that the part of the creative process where I feel like I'm weakest is when I don't have a clear end vision for what I want to create. And while that's fine if I'm working on something offline or if it's like, a personal project, that's fine because if that happens during that point, I don't have any problem with, trying to come back to it another day, giving it a few more spins around the block, trying to brain out what is working and what isn't working. Conversely, if it's on stream, unless I want to make it a two-parter, which I almost never do, it's one of those things where it's like, okay, I'm gonna have to I have 3, maybe 2.5 hours to figure out what I want this to look like and what I want it to do. And if I can't figure it out at that time, I'm going to feel frustrated. It's going to be a much slower stream. The vibes won't be as good. It won't come as natural as having a clear end goal in mind. So having noticed that, I do think it is. I do think I've gotten part of the idea for what makes drawing fun for me on stream, not so much off stream. That part I've still got some work to do to figure out. But I do think something that helps a lot is if what I'm drawing makes me smile a little bit. Like there are times that I have sacrificed much needed sleep and time to do something else that was probably more important. Like I've blown off those obligations and responsibilities because I've had a really funny idea for something to draw. And I'm like, if I don't draw this, I'm going to like lose that spark and I'm going to be fucked when I try to come back to it. A lot of people are surprised, at least a lot of people in these servers are usually surprised by how quick I am to do something. Doesn't it boost your morale too? That's true. I do think that's an excellent point, that if you finish the drawing and if you're able to laugh at it, if it ticks all of those boxes, you feel very accomplished and you feel like you've created something valuable outside of yourself that day. You're a speed demon. Thank you. That means a lot, actually. But yeah, and I do think that is part of the reason why I am a speed demon, so to speak, because I do think that if I lose that spark, I'm just not going to find the idea as fun anymore. So yeah, I guess what I'm trying to say here is that Newton's law of movements also applies to artistic creativity to some extent. I think what my issue is with the shoe and the foot here is the fact that I am having a hard time picturing how it's supporting the weight of the great sword when it's like that, because I'm imagining the feet like firmly planted on the ground. Okay. And then the front part is gonna kind of come in like this. Actually, you know what? I'm gonna do the cloth around the hips and do like a twirl almost. I feel like that's going to add a lot of motion to the piece. See, I think, although there are different approaches to it, I do think at the end of the day, everybody wants a little bit of frill in their life. Because, like, if you think about it, right, even like military dress, right? If you think about like men's military dress from the naval era, how it had those big swashy is not a real word. Those big old capes and such, and the little epaulettes with the frills on them. They look pretty sick. I think most people would be pretty happy to wear something like that. Or like bicycles. You know how like sometimes they make fun of like bicycles with like little frills off of the what do you call the not frills actually, tassels. I think the correct term for them in this case is tassels. Like with tassels on the handlebars. Say what you will about them, like, but I think they add a lot of character to the vehicle. It feels weird to call a bicycle a vehicle, actually. They add a lot of personality and color, or cowboy pants, for example, like chaps with like little frills on them. There's a lot of opportunities to add a little bit of extra stuff. I personally don't add too much though, because I recognize when I'm drawing characters, I try not to do that too much unless it's like a maid or something, in which case they're kind of mandatory. But I try not to do that too much because I understand that if I do it too much, I will also have to end up drawing it a lot if I ever want to make the character again. And while they're not the most difficult thing in the world to render, they are kind of a pain in the ass. So it's a little bit of a balancing act. The other day, somebody hit me with a revenge attack on Art Fight, and they said that the vibes for a lot of my characters give like fighting game character vibes, and I was like, yes! I'm so happy it does that. Because I do try to do that to some extent. I think more so than making them look like fighting game characters, I think my goal for the design process is to, one, make it easy enough that I can draw it over and over without getting sick of drawing the outfits, and two, that they like have a lot of individualism. And there's no artist on Earth, well, unless you work in like Hoya or something, but there's generally no artist on Earth that looks at a character that they make and they say, you know what, how can I make that shit more generic? Unless they have like some kind of insane 400 IQ character design plan in play. Because I can actually picture that happening very easily. Just making a very generic character and, making them become very important for whatever reason. And that happens sometimes not because there's like a great plan in place, but because that just helps for self-insert kind of stuff. I'm talking about like there's this. Okay, so have you guys heard the urban legend that ninja? The reason that ninja look like that in modern depictions, even though they probably never dress like that in actual historical stuff, is because of how kabuki theater worked. If you haven't heard of this before, so there is, I don't actually think it might be kabuki, but there is a, hang on, black suit stagehand. Kuroko, that's the name. Okay, so there is in Japanese theater the idea of a kuroko, which is a stagehand that is wearing all black, generally doesn't have their face showing, and their whole goal is to basically assist with dramatic movements. And part of the suspension of disbelief is that you don't see them there. You know, they're not supposed to represent any like actual character. They're just there for set dressing and to help the character stand out, and you're supposed to completely ignore them. And the reason that ninja are depicted the way they are is because in a lot of twists they would have one of the kuroko just suddenly stab somebody to assassinate them, and it'd be like super shocking because it'd be like some, you know, it'd be like the 18th century. That's probably too far up. The 14th century equivalent of like that shit that happens in like Undertale when it changes the window size, or like, no, actually Undertale never changed your window size. I don't think the engine was made for that. But like, if you've ever seen a game called Rhythm Doctor, there is a stage that plays around with the window size, and it's kind of like that. It's quite fascinating, honestly. Okay, and then that's gonna come out like that. Or no, actually, because, I mean, sort of. So there's a little bit of yes and a little bit of no. Okay, this is gonna have a big old gap in it. And over here, we're just gonna have the armband. But yeah, look at how much better that looks with the perspective turned on. Really need to remember to do that more often. I think I actually think that might be why a lot of the issues that I ran into with the with the 3D models actually occurred. I'm not remembering to apply perspective aggressively enough, and that's why I've been preferring like picture reference images so much recently, is because they do account for perspective. Interesting. It's very rare that I get tripped up with something, so I don't know how to approach that issue when it comes to like art stuff. I'm kind of emotionally stunted in that regard. Okay, emotionally might not be the right word, but I generally don't have a lot of problem-solving skills when I hit a roadblock in art, because I generally don't run into them very frequently. So whenever that happens, I usually try to like rotate it into my mind, or I try a bunch of different things until I find one that looks all right. People say that having art friends to ask for new perspective on stuff you're stuck with. I could see that, honestly. I do think that would be actually very helpful. Yeah. I do also think that I remember reading somewhere, cannot for the life of me remember where right now. I don't think it was in one of the books that I borrowed. But basically, it does say that a good method of approaching your issues with your creative process is journaling what frustrates you, and that way you at least have a record at the moment of how you feel and what is tripping you up. I'll be asking people, or like even sending it to someone helps you see a problem. Oh, That makes sense, actually. Because have you ever heard of, like, rubber duck programming? Feels like a very similar idea. Journaling. It always comes back to journaling. It's a scientific... It really does piss me off a little bit that everything in the world is, to some degree, solvable using the scientific method. Because, like, journaling is just having the scientific method, but, like, because, like, have you ever heard of that phrase of, like, it isn't science... It is science when you write down what you did and what the results were? It's the exact same shit. It's always been the same exact same thing. Time is a flat circle. But yeah, rubber duck programming is a funny version of that idea, which is that why do you hate it? The scientific what do you call it? Like the scientific process is pretty robust and fun. And it makes sense too, right? Because it forces you to be mindful of what you're putting in and what's coming out. You know, it is just basically you running tests on like why you're getting tripped up and like running a diagnostic that way. I hate what I don't understand, apparently. Well, I have some disappointing news about a very easy way to begin understanding it. Like yogurt? You know what? I kind of get you on that front. Because, like, while I enjoy yogurt and I kind of understand it on a basic level, I don't think I understand yogurt. I think that's like a valid problem to have, honestly, because like what is like I know what yogurt is. I know how it's created. But like what does it do? I'm making more yogurt and to make yogurt you need yogurt, but how do you get that? I think somebody just got lucky one time, to be honest. I know, for example, that there are people who manage to make cheese without figuring out like animal-based rennet, because I think certain plants are able to produce rennet, and therefore you can use them to make cheese. Or like penicillin, how penicillin was just one dude with moldy bread that got insanely lucky. You know, it is kind of crazy that we just let that guy inject penicillin into people, or like, you know, do whatever he wanted with penicillin, because that is still very much mold. Like, we were just letting that dude mold it up. Why the fuck did we do that? Like, obviously in retrospect it was the right decision, but like, you must feel like you must have taken a real gamble back in the day, just trusting some dude who was like, hey, I threw some bread in an agar dish and it fucking created this miracle drug. Want to try it out? Like, do you recognize the amount of faith you would need to do that shit? Again, very much the right call. And it was, like, scientifically tested, but, like, Jesus Christ. Mold? Mold in my mouth? For real? Are you serious? Yes. I don't have the stomach for rigorous pharmaceutical experiments. They just did anything back then. For real! There was like this dude who had a hole in his stomach that was like a second mouth, basically, and there was this one dude who was obsessed with it. And they made some of the most insane advancements in our understanding of the gastric system. But it was still just one pervert who was obsessed with this dude's stomach hole. It was a fucking jungle out there back then. Seriously though, the stomach hole guy who experimented on the stomach hole haver should have gone to jail. Like way, like he did some fucked up shit. We should have jumped that guy for real. Anyway, I was talking about rubber duck programming. The basic principle, the idea behind rubber duck programming is that whenever you're programming or whenever you have like a rigorous mental task that you often run into issues with, the idea behind it is that you have like a small toy or something, you know. A rubber duck is the go-to one for, and what the method was named after. And whenever you run into a problem, you would explain it very patiently, as if you were explaining it to a child, to the duck. And generally what that does is that it helps you understand and vocalize what the issue is. And while you're explaining it, it very often happens that you understand the root of the problem and you're able to solve it more efficiently. Also, I just struggled for like so long to do some additional perspective stuff with this sword. I'm just gonna go ahead and go over what it looks like, because I think I'm doing too much. Unless, hang on, because like if we take it to be like it's one rusty sword, yeah, I mean, to be fair, you don't really need to worry about. The problem with rust is that it makes things more brittle and it doesn't help stuff cut as good. And I don't think neither of those are like a super huge concern for the sword in question here. You know? Like, I feel like if you're worried about it breaking, then you've definitely probably used the wrong metals. Because what do you mean you're afraid of it breaking? It's a big sword. And second of all, if you're worried about it cutting, why would you be? You're really just crushing people with a giant hunk of metal that is vaguely shaped like a sword. Like, this is a sword in theory. At best! You can achieve more or less the same results just by carrying around a particularly portable fridge and just chucking it at people. Also, let's be real, given how much metal real estate there is on this bad boy, it would be very difficult to keep it oiled regularly. Like, you would be you would post a picture of your monthly bills, and sword oil would probably come into, like, the top 3 expenses for you. Okay, and then that's gonna come in like this. I mean, to be fair as well, again, slashing isn't really the purpose of this one, so I do think, like, as long as you keep the very tip, like this region, nice and sharp and well oiled, I think you're honestly pretty good. Perhaps if you were to get sponsored, what product would you want it to be? No clue, honestly. I've never thought about sponsorships too much. I feel like if it was a product that I would have to show, it would probably have to be something that I use already. Like, if I got like a sponsorship from like JDB herbal tea, I would be able to rock that thing easily, because I drink maybe 12 cans of those in a month. I drink it very regularly because it's very cheap at the Asian goods store near me, and it tastes good. Or like one of those like tour box thingies, right? Those little controllers for your what do you call, like, drawing tablet and such. Those I would probably be able to use because I already have a very similar system, and I feel like I'd be able to adapt pretty well. I think the one that I'd be worst adopted to, or like the worst one that you could ask me to sponsor for you, would probably be like those make-at-home meal kits. I think I would be hopeless at those because I hate waiting for shit to be ordered through the online. Like, if you told me that that I have to show for like Hello Fresh or some shit, I would be like, you need to shop somewhere else for your morally bankrupt human being, because I cannot ever imagine myself using those. With all your soup making, it's kind of shocking. Yeah, but like for those, I just need to like go to like 2 or 3 stores near my house. I don't need to like fucking have a subscription model and be like, you know what, this week you're making soup, and I'll be like, okay. You know what, that pisses me off. So the issue isn't so much the cooking aspect of it, so much as it is like the supply chain, I suppose would be the best term. Like, I don't need some teeny bopper in Silicon Valley deciding that I'm gonna have ravioli this week. That's stupid. I don't need that in my life. Are you gonna post your different soups? I don't know how much value that would add to the whole rice VTubing experience, to be quite honest. Those soups and I need to be alone for a minute, you know? No, not really. But yeah, no, I have no plans to like soup post extensively. I think like once was enough. Like, I think the reason that I got so into soup posting that one time that I bought too many ingredients was because it was like some funny shit that happened to me. I have no issues posting about something like that. But if it's just like me always posting about soup, I feel like that would dilute the brand a little bit. I mean, I'd like to see. Aw, thank you. But yeah, no, I feel like that would dilute my brand a little bit. Because, you know, at one point I would have had life, dreams, and a family, but now I'm just soup guy. I have too much shit going on as is, to be honest. I'm already, at least in V's server, I'm already the guy who's like into ancient Chinese cultural things and martial arts, and also being a bag of rice. I feel like if I added much more to that, I would become like a weird sort of encyclopedic entity. I didn't think soup would be your downfall. Nobody thinks soup will be their downfall. That's the thing. You can't be too careful about what's going to be your downfall. It could be soup. It could be grass jelly. It could be any number of things. That's why you always got to stay on your toes. Never relax ever. It does look like there are some more cracks in the armor that I hadn't noticed before. I might actually make the sword a tiny bit bigger. But yeah, this is all just to say that I just don't want to post about soup. I'm trying to make a whole bit out of it, but I just don't feel like posting about it, really. I could give any number of reasons for my hang-ups for it. Okay, me lunch break is over, gotta get back to the grind, I will leave a lurky. No worries. Enjoy the rest of your day. That's okay, Babs, you can do what you want. Right? It's awesome. You can do whatever you want forever. A lot of people talk about like curating their online experience. I think a lot of the time you need to realize that you also curate what you post as well. Not just what is shown to you, or what you see. Okay, there we go. I think the what do you call, the loincloth isn't the right word. The hip cloak? Hang on, there we go. It's a little bit too horizontal right now, so I'm just gonna go ahead and do that. And also, I want to increase a little bit of the canvas size upwards a little bit more again, because I wanna stretch out the legs a little bit. Like that. Yeah. I don't know. It's very fascinating to like think about the way you post and what you say, because like obviously you're not supposed to be saying anything too personal or too identifiable, let's say, right? Like that's internet safety 101, and most people still abide by that, thank goodness. But I don't want to just be posting too many snippets of my daily life, because I feel like that's not particularly valuable. It's not entertaining. And you know, some people might still be interested in it. You know, I'm sure my friends would like to know what I'm up to. Like yesterday when I posted drinking sake, I did that. First of all, I did that for a bit that I'm planning to cash in 2 to 3 weeks from now. So be prepared for that, first of all. And second of all, I don't know. I feel like if you get into the habit of posting your daily activities and the things around you too often, you start to fall into like this kind of, you begin to risk the panopticon experience. Right? Like at some point what's going to happen is that you're going to see your own daily life. It's very much like becoming a filmmaker or an artist, where that's because you are technically doing art stuff when you try to post more regularly. You are trying to find a way to create things outside of yourself. So you begin to approach the world through that lens. It becomes a sort of priority for you. As I'm sure a lot of artists can relate, when you start becoming more proficient in a specific art style or a method, you start thinking in terms of that and trying to... It increases your mental load regarding that particular subject. And when you extend the scope of that subject to be your everyday life, I think what very often ends up happening is that you become stressed because you feel the need to... excuse me, you feel the need to provide a quote-unquote authentic experience for which you really have... Like, you start doing things for the sake of posting them rather than for the sake of doing them, which is what, honestly, I believe God intended. Like, I'm reading right now this one... I guess it wouldn't be a documentary. There's essentially a count of different... You know, I followed it up with the... I was trying to like stay on the same kind of topic as the book about fraud that I read about recently. This one, the one that I read about fraud was called "Lying for Money," yada 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 by Dan Davies. This one is called "Hype" by Gabrielle Bluestone, executive producer of the Netflix documentary Fire. And a lot of what she's talking about right now, in this first chapter that she's going through, she's talking a lot about, okay, what were like some of the early warning signs? What was the Fire Festival guy's like deal growing up? And you see a lot that it was very much the same as like what it ended up being closer to the Fire Festival, which is that he was very frequently underpaying people, or like trying to stimulate growth that wasn't really happening, and of course not really compensating people properly for the work they did for him. And more importantly, though, I'm noticing that in a lot of the commentary, it's pointing towards like this trend, I suppose would be a good way to call it, that for people who are trying to like make a living off of social media, they do have to do a lot of what they do in their daily life for the purpose of posting it in social media. Like they find themselves being unable to have fun because they're like, how can I maximize this for content? This is not only to their detriment of enjoyment, of course, but also occasionally to the detriment of their health, to the detriment of their well-being more generally. And it just becomes this very unhappy situation where from the outside looking in, you're like, why is this dingus talking about like, you know, their bowel movements on Twitter? And even from the inside looking in, you're like, wow, this is so fascinating. Should I be worried about this? I don't know how to put it. It really does establish a strong need for boundaries, I think, between like people who, especially if you spend a lot of time in the internet, you need to be aware of, or at least I think that you need to be strongly aware of the boundaries that you feel like you're setting. Because if you do not set them clearly, I do feel like, and obviously this isn't really that applicable for a teeny bopper 200 followers, all of whom I treasure very much, have her on Twitch, right? Like I'm just like, I am barely a blip in the radar of basically anybody who isn't in my immediate friend group. And I kind of like it that way, if I'm being honest. Like, I do want to try to do more ambitious things, and I do want to... It is an ambition of mine to help somebody's dreams come true and make something that can, you know, be the artist for someone, be the person who can really, like, uplift them. The reason I haven't had much luck in that department, I think, is mostly because I haven't been selling my services as an artist too openly. Like, for the better part of the year, like last year and even in the current year a little bit, when somebody asked if my commissions were open, I would have to say, I'm really sorry, but it's kind of busy right now, and I have to focus on some other stuff. And they'd be very understanding, of course. But at the same time, like, that was to my detriment as an art professional. But this is getting away from the original topic that I was speaking on. So basically, I guess what I'm trying to say is the reason that I do feel like posting daily stuff, or, you know, having that as a posting habit is intoxicating in a way that I don't want to experience. I think that's the easiest and best way that I could put it. Like, it seems like it could be fun for some people, but, like, I don't think I would enjoy my ride on that particular carnival. I mean, I talked about... I didn't speak on this another time as well, I think, where I was like, you know, there are some people who get famous overnight and handle it super well. Because, I don't know, maybe they had a plan in place, maybe they had, like... You know, maybe even they had illusions of grandeur, and it actually did pan out for them. which I always think is like the funniest possible outcome. I do think it is really funny whenever somebody's like, you know what, I was born to be hot shit. I'm gonna be great. I just need the opportunity. And then the opportunity comes and they're exactly as good as they said they were gonna be. I don't know, there's something kind of delightful about that in a strange way. I find it admirable because I think to have that confidence and to know yourself that well, it really does take quite a lot of courage and a lot of planning, because if they had that plan in place already, or if they were able to adapt to that situation so well, that speaks to an unbelievably intelligent, enterprising character. You know, even if it is shameless, even if it is a little iffy from time to time, being able to capitalize on that so well is like a sign that you're basically in the right business. It's the same reason you would admire a particularly skilled artisan or a particularly good artist. Like, it takes a degree of skill to do what they did, and, you know, they have it. They got it. They navigated that successfully. Of course, this isn't to say that I'm a fan of all sudden glow-ups, or, you know, some of all certain people blowing up at some point, but, like, Lord knows there are some people I have dabbled in being a hater towards in my private moments. But, you know, credit where credit is due, they handled it well. Of course, sometimes they just put on the poker face and, you know, they look like they handle it well, maybe, but it is very much stressful, which I imagine is the majority of cases. I do reckon that no matter what the circumstances are, it is always a very stressful experience. Actually, let me take a look at that ref again, because I need to Huh, okay. I was gonna say, I wonder what I should do for the shoulder here. But I think I'm just gonna do like a bigger shoulder and then kind of curving down like this. Okay, looks good. I'm gonna move this down just a little bit and then we can get started on the line art. Ah, my wrists. Also, we spent a lot of time on this sketch. I'm gonna need to kind of hustle a little bit. I do want to get to bed at a reasonable hour today. Okay, bring down the pen size to maybe 8. And we can begin our work. Oh, is this not a vector layer? Oops. Let's try that again. Actually, let me bring the ref up to the top left here, just so that we can always kind of see it. Okay, I think I see how it is. Okay, and this is gonna kind of go in like this. Perfect. Oh yeah. A couple of the books that I ordered, I talked, I think last week about ordering a couple of books to get delivered to my house. They finally came in today. So I'm very excited to get cracking on those after I finished my current, the ones that I've got on loan from the library. But yeah, I did crack them open for a tiny little bit just to see what I was working with. Very happy so far. I will say that some of the grammar on one of them just feels a little bit off. Not in like the sense that it was like, oh, I think this is AI generated, but in the sense that like, oh, this person isn't used to writing for like books. Because it does feel a lot like the way that they write is more like they were used to typing out what they said and sending it through chat rooms. You know, a lot of ampersands instead of where ands would suffice, that sort of thing. Or, you know, very small grammatical errors. But that, again, the good news is that I'm not here for their grammatical accuracy. I'm here for the other advice that they have to give, so ball up top. Oh, wait, actually, you know what? Actually, you know what? I don't need to flip this. I'm going into that with confidence. And with the understanding that if I dally too long in trying to fix up the line art, I'm going to be here forever. It's important to know your limits. Okay. I did learn this the other day about a tool that you can use when you're drawing on CSP that makes the size of the brush scale with how zoomed in you are. So that way you are basically the size relative to how zoomed in you are never changes. which seems kind of awesome, but I don't have a particular gripe with that right now. Although maybe it would be better if you're trying to vary your line width and you have a tendency to go in super deep on the detail like I do. It's hard to say. Well, I'm sure they wouldn't have spent the time coding it, programming it, and implementing it into the software if it didn't have a decent use, so everyone should use their own discretion to figure out whether or not it's useful for them. Oh my god, my house smells like the soup and I'm already hungry again. I ate some like 2 hours ago. Relax. I do think that is my one issue, is that I think like I eat reasonable portions, but I do think my stomach sucks at being sated for long periods of time. And this is particularly problematic because I can always just eat more, right? Like, if I get hungry or peckish later in the evening, I can just have myself another bite to eat. But it is kind of annoying just having to run up those food expenses anyway. Hunger is such bullshit. We should have another way of being able to tell we need nutrients. Rather than like some kind of ambiguous craving that was hard-coded into us. I don't know. I just wish it was easier to... I also recognize that my efficiency sees like as much as a 45% drop whenever I'm too hungry. Especially if it's like a thinking task. If I'm really hungry and I'm supposed to think really hard about something, I'm cooked. Genuinely no winning in that scenario. Well, I suppose it's the same for a lot of different people, though. I can't be the only one who has issues thinking when they're hungry. It's been said that no great work was ever accomplished on an empty stomach. So it isn't. I'm at the very least not the first person to see it that way, if anything else. Okay, then over here. Okay. It is really funny that I left this huge bunch of cloth right here for the sleeve, but the actual shoulder is now relatively tiny. Of course, we can use shapes and lines to communicate the existence of a shoulder, but it still does look a little silly. Gonna go a little bit thicker on the lines for the gauntlet, I think. Or no. I should just do what comes natural. I can thicken the lines manually later. Besides, I kind of want to blur them a little bit. once we get into the final coloring stages and such. Surprisingly, I'm not too worried about all the metal shading that's going to be involved here. Mostly because it's not going to be super, super shiny metal, which is the most difficult type to draw. It's going to be like rough metal, which I have some experience with, and, you know, we can cook and go. We can cook and go. It is like a microwave craft dinner compared to the 5-star beef Wellington that would be like super complicated light shading on every surface for like if the character was like a chrome body type of person, you know, like the Silver Surfer or something like that, that would be much. I might have a little trouble then. But as it stands, nah, I'd win. Okay, then over here, and we're gonna go in like this. Perfect. Gonna add just a little bit of a chip there. I think it looks chic to have a small crack in your armor. Actually, recently, a series that I've been wanting to read is this one called Dungeon Tower by the author of an older series called Blame. I tried reading Blame, but that shit was too difficult to follow. I didn't know what the hell was going on. I need somebody to... Like, the art is very pretty, and it does a great job of communicating a huge sense of scale. But it is very difficult to follow the action that is happening. It really doesn't help that the main character has, like, a gun that can wipe out an entire section of a building, because then when you get into, like, a proper fight and the main character is just blasting his gun left and right, like, entire chunks of the landscape go missing, and it's very difficult to track what the hell is actually happening. It's a very cool power in theory, but it doesn't lend itself to, like, the more gritty, realistic style of the author. But from what I've seen, the art design for Dungeon Tower seems to be very tight. So I'm excited to crack it open if I ever get the chance. I've also been seeing that show, Ruri Rock's been blowing up, and I'm kind of happy for that, honestly. I'm always happy when like a more kind of when a show with like an almost like an edutainment bent gets very popular, because I feel like a lot of people benefit from that. Okay, gonna be putting this over here. Then that's gonna move in like this. Perfect. It does also reinforce my firm belief that every so often, some dude who has just like an unbelievable, or you know, an author more generally, who has like an unbelievably deep knowledge of a topic or field of knowledge, needs to make like a comic or needs to help write a comic, just because it helps. I don't know how to put it, like, any kind of area that has extensive depth to it lends itself well to being written about, because the depth is already there. You know, there's already a bunch of documented and different ways to create knowledge, to create variances that are interesting to prod at and poke at, which lends itself in turn to making a very compelling narrative. Or even like an entertaining one, because in a lot of these cases they're very much like easygoing, not super high stakes series, but that still have like a story to follow or some events that happen, right? Like stuff still happens in them, but it's not. There's no like super intense overarching plot or epic overarching storyline that to be followed for the most part. It's just the characters are doing this today. It goes awry or it becomes interesting in this specific method. I don't know. It's necessary for like the ecosystem, I think, to have such works told. And I think the very best ones of that variety come from people who are experts in a very specific thing. Whether that's specific restaurants or specific choice of career, or I'm thinking about like the Maiko House one. How a lot of that, how ostensibly it's a cooking manga, but it's also very much about like the daily life of people training to be geisha. So it is fascinating from that angle. It creates a sort of interesting depth due to the unique circumstances of that field of knowledge. One of the books that I actually got myself this time around was a small account of a bunch of different like bedroom beat producers that it goes a little bit into detail about how did they get big, or like it's just a fun anecdote or an interesting anecdote from their lived experience making music and performing music professionally, which I think is going to be super interesting to learn about, because the thing about music is that more so than art, and this is something that I am jealous of for musicians being able to do it, is that while art is very much something you can just keep to yourself and that has its own value, the fact that music does need to be shared with others, and that by the necessity the best way to share that with others is through venues, right? Like, I think most people will agree nowadays that if you have to go to a specific gallery to see the works of an artist, it's a little bit of a pain in the ass, because you might not live in the area and you want to see those things, but you might have to just buy a digital photo book or something. And in the end, whether they host a gallery or not, you would still need to. First of all, galleries have like a very specific code, I suppose, of like what. Not that's too much of a generalization. Let me backtrack a little bit. Due to how music venues work and how so many people love music to the extent that they want, something new, anything new to come in, I feel like it's much easier to get your foot in the door as an indie producer to play your stuff somewhere than it would be to like display your artworks as a professional artist. But I don't know the scene too well. That's a very broad generalization that I'm making, and I'm going to need to study up a little bit, because I'm sure that it certainly cannot be that easy. Like, there's open mic nights and whatnot, sure, but like at the same time, it's also probably true. A lot of people do, and I've seen this happen where, oddly enough, I have seen some artists who also dabble in doing DJ stuff. They post about this, this party or this set that they're planning to play somewhere, and they're very excited for it. I do think that it likely cannot be that easy. It is possible that what I'm thinking of instead is that the person in question that's telling the story makes it seem easy because they were already involved in that scene, and so they have some understanding of how to make their work reach out to more people. I think that's probably the more likely thing. And the one snippet of this that I read was actually of one artist who was like, yeah, the venue that I was playing at said that they didn't want, a lot of the other people who were at that venue were kind of mad at me because I was trying to play a whole bunch of different genres in my sets, and it was throwing off the crowd. So I basically just found my own little venue in Quebec where I could host this like super diverse set list extravaganza night. And you know, it worked out for them. So I guess you do. It is a lot. Also, in addition, obviously, to having that same luck that you need for art to be noticed and to kind of come into the big time, as kind of cringe as that word feels to say. I feel. I guess what I'm trying to say is that I feel like at the end of the day, we're under more similar circumstances. It's just that there are more music venues to share stuff with compared to like galleries where you can host your drawings of like anime women, I suppose. I feel like that's actually a fair point to concede. Like I do think that for whatever reason, visual art, and this is so funny for it specifically, that visual art has become this kind of like cultural battleground where people have to think very hard about like, what should be considered art, what shouldn't be considered art. I've always been of the philosophy that art is anything you can get away with. I very much pass the what are that guy's names is the fountain test, where it's a very fun test. Or by fun, I mean that it is useful and easily applicable. If you ask somebody their opinion on like the artwork The Fountain by trying to remember their name, by Marcel Duchamp, right. The Fountain by Marcel Duchamp. If they have like a viscerally negative reaction to them, it is a bit of a red flag, quite honestly. I don't really care about the Fountain. While I think it was inventive for its time, I do think that it might be a little bit overhyped, because I feel like a lot of people have done I am neutral towards the Fountain. I think that it did what it did very well and very succinctly. Not a fan of the fact that it spawned like a dozen different variations on that theme. Like I do feel like Marcel Duchamp basically nailed it the first time, being like, yeah, I'm putting up this very strange looking urinal as my art piece. What are you going to do about it? Tell me it's not art? And technically, I do think that it fits the definition of art that I was taught in like an early philosophy class, that it has to be deliberately created and it cannot be used for another purpose. Because if you try to use Marcel Duchamp's The Fountain for its alleged intended purpose, you're going to have a bad time, it feels like. In any case, I do feel like what Marcel Duchamp got it so good the first time. It's very much the same issue of like, why are there 5 million sequels to this show when the first one was so good? I'm someone who gets very easily annoyed by things like that. It's very small of me. Okay, that's almost all the line art done, and it only took us like 45 minutes. How about that? Okay. Bring in this like this. I also saw that the Breaking Bad team is advertising something new today. It was like this little agar petri dish with a smiley face swapped onto it that said happiness is contagious. I do wonder what the hell they're going to try and do. I was talking about it earlier. Like, the way that they phrase it makes it sound like it's some kind of bioterrorist weapon. To be fair, I've never seen Breaking Bad, so maybe it did involve such things of that nature. What do I know? I mean, I doubt it, quite frankly, but I could be wrong. I've been wrong before. Okay, am I forgetting anything? No, I think I got most of it, honestly. Just a sword left. Okay, and then... Alright, and then we're just gonna do some quick strokes for the crossguard, I guess you would call this part? Feels a little bit thick to be called a crossguard, but alright. Okay, I'm gonna drink some water. Actually, that would be a good time. Actually, you know what? Let me do like a quick reset because I feel like if I don't follow this impulse to stretch and kind of loosen up a little bit right now, I feel like I'm just gonna lose it, and it'll be gone until I finish like the line art, and I'll be like, maybe I should just move on directly to the coloring phase. Who knows? All right. Okay. Okay, this is just gonna kind of come in like this. No need to be super dramatic about the curves, I just need to have them present, and then the flow of the eye will take care of the rest. Oh, that's a nice line. If I do say so myself, that is a nice line. It kind of sucks getting attached to the lines that you create. You know what I mean? Of course it's important to have pride in your work, there's no denying that. But I do find it a little bit onerous whenever I'm drawing something, I'm like, oh man, this line came out really good, but now I'm going to have to delete it. A lot of that can be resolved through thorough planning. I think that is also what I need to take more seriously from here on out as a creator, is just planning stuff. Like, I do think it is a little bit... Of course there are times where you can't plan things, but even then you can plan a little bit, right? So, for example, that time that I was trying to make the rice beast into like a heraldic beast, that time I didn't really have a huge plan going forward, but I understood what my goal was clearly. I had a vague idea of what I wanted it to look like, and I had some sources of inspiration for what I wanted it to look like. And that went pretty smoothly from what I recall. Maybe not, actually. Or maybe the one thing where I struggle is like the rule of tincture and everything. Or like the colors. I think it was the colors that threw me off the most. Okay, and then we collapse this in and just do this. Then bring this up here. Nah, I don't think having the inner part is going to do much. I do think we're going to be able to use shading to communicate what I want to do with that part more clearly. So let's just leave it until then. Okay, and then this is gonna flatten out, and we're just gonna drag it up here. Actually, maybe I should use the redraw vector line with thingamabob. That might be a bit much. Hang on. So maybe 11? No, that's a little much too. Maybe just adjust line width and scale that up. Okay, we're just gonna bring this inward like this. That looks messed up. Hang on. I think I made these too straight. Hang on. Here's what let's do. We'll reduce the pen width for this one by like 2. And that way it'll... Or actually, you know what else I could do? First, let's finish doing this thing. Okay. What we're going to do now to straighten out the sword a little bit is we're actually going to use the Simplify Vector Line tool. And what that usually does is that it does reduce the number of points in the line, so that usually makes it straighter. And then I'm just going to scale up the width for everything because it looks like we just kind of erased the whole sword. Most of the sword. A good portion of the sword. An appreciable quantity of the sword has been removed through these means. Maybe a little bit more like this, and then push this up. Okay. Same deal up here. We're just going to curve this out a little bit. Perfect. Or is it? And then if we just push this one up a little bit and then curve it down. No. Yeah, that'll do. You know what? It might not be good enough for smooth jazz, but it's good enough for rock and roll. Actually, no, hang on. I can fix this even further. 99% of fixers give up before they actually fix the problem. Keep gambling. Actually, no, wait, I think that did do it. I mean, like, this part here could actually use a little bit of, sprucing up, but besides that, we're actually in pretty good shape. Okay, and then that's just gonna kind of increase like this. Yeah, alright, I think we're ready to move on to coloring. Are there any cracks on the helmet that I should be aware of? No, I think that's about it. Oh, wait, no, hang on, I did miss something. I missed this part of the cape back here. Minor thing, though. That's easily enough repaired. Okay, now we're ready to rock. Let me just stretch my wrists real quick. Make sure they stay nice and limber, and we can get a move on. Wait, no, right, I need to do the thing. The ice cream thing. Why? What's your problem? God, alright. There we go. Sometimes there is just this section of it that just refuses to fucking play ball, and it is just baffling sometimes which section it specifically chooses to be. Okay, the rest of these seem fine though. Alright, let's get a move on. God, I'm remembering a lot from like a this old boomer shooter that I remember Civ 11 covered, which could refer to any number of games really. But I'm specifically thinking of this one where there were like there was this power up you could pick up that let you unlock a secondary attack for your weapon for a brief period of time, and it was called like I remember very specifically because the UI for whenever that activated said like Tome Rampage. And I just remember thinking that was the sickest stuff ever. I don't know, there's something very, very sincerely hype about like older shooters. Like I'm thinking a lot about like the Castle Wolfenstein pre-level screen that just says "Get Psyched" in big capital letters. And I don't know, there's something very straightforward and honest about that. It does feel a lot like we've lost some of that ability to... There was like some kind of like self-awareness that it was a video game, right? Nowadays, whenever you do that, there has to be like some kind of tongue-in-cheek kind of bend to it. But in older games, it was very much just openly acknowledged that you were playing a video game. And while immersion was important, and it wasn't like such an overriding factor that the devs felt uncomfortable to be like, yeah, you know what? Something real awesome is coming up. Get excited. Like nowadays you have to do that with like musical cues and all other kinds of boring crap. But back in the day, you could just like have a big screen that said "Get psyched" before every level. I don't know, I feel like that prepared you for the experience in a very unique sort of way. I kind of miss it. Oh no, this is the darker leather. Hang on. Or darker cloth. I can't think about the cloth mother wire mother thing too long before I get sad. I don't know, it just seems especially cruel because it's still like baby chimpanzees. Even though the experiment was perfectly ethical and it proved that what it set out to do. I don't know, thinking about it still makes me upset. Which I feel is probably not that weird of a reaction, but all the same, it feels weird to be having it. Okay, then the shoes, we can update the color on those. And then the color of the gauntlet. Gonna have to paint in this armor too. I feel that the kind of faceplates that I put on the knights that I draw occasionally look a little bit too much like cow catchers for trains. But you have to admit that it has a certain appeal to it. Okay. We'll make the sword the same color as the rest of the armor. For the most part. I do think slightly lighter color on the inside, on the outside, and slightly darker color on the inside of it is warranted. Maybe kind of leaning more towards purple. We can figure it out more closely as we go along. Okay. Shading time, I guess. That felt pretty quick. I don't know, is just me or did that take like 5 seconds? That was a very fast one. Lots of very clear, readable shapes. I think that was the greatest strength to be found here. Now for the metal thing. So I'm glad that that's included a reference for how the light should bounce off. I will maybe be following it to varying degrees. I do think I get what he's trying to do though. So hang on. Okay. I think I kind of get it. Let's try it. So let's try and do... sort of like this, and then we're gonna have a slightly darker layer here, kind of like just where it meets the thingamabob. Absolutely not the technical name for it. Please disregard that. Okay, we're gonna have just this part here. Oh yeah, that's looking clean. Alright, let's proceed with that for most of this then. Okay, gonna just do this. Something like that. Perfect. Although maybe we can just slim this part down a little bit. I feel like it'll look better if it has just slightly less of a thickness there. Okay. Now we just have to do that for the rest of this whole thing. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. Okay, this is gonna kind of come in like this. Okay. Fucking, it always gets me that the song uses a sample of the Wilhelm scream for part of its melody. What the hell is wrong with these people? To be fair, the Wilhelm scream does have something of a melodic property. I don't know. It's kind of like this for the same reason I imagine that some people add like Discord ping sounds to their songs. Like, it is very annoying, but you can't deny that it has some kind of evocative effect. And what is art at the end of the day if not the ability to evoke emotions within people? Okay, and that's gonna get darker down here. Okay, and that's gonna be like this. I feel like I'm missing something here. I feel like hang on. I feel like the issue is that I'm not adding sufficient contrast. It's all a little bit too loosey-goosey. So maybe what I can do is right here, right? I can leave this space out for the ordinary armor color. And then what I can do is I can just make it follow the... Yeah. I can make it follow the cloak up there. Okay. Okay, and then back here. All right. We can do something similar here. Or actually, you know what I just thought of? What I just thought about? What we could do is we could use the gradient erase right here to create that really kind of nice effect. I think that looks really good. Okay, that's gonna come in like so, and then what we just need to do is just add some highlights here and there. Oh yeah, that's coming along real nice. Let me just select this section and I'll unselect this part up here. Let's use a slightly darker color for some of the, well, darker sections here. Okay, and then we'll do something similar right here where we'll use the slightly lighter color just for this section here. And I think that should be sufficient for that part of the body armor. I think that has a good ratio of communicating like light and darkness. Okay, then we'll do the rest of the armor. So, almost like the opposite approach really here. We're gonna do the same kind of wand select, maybe take out a couple of key areas here. Hang on, looking at this, does it look like it juts out a little bit? It does look like it juts out a little bit, okay. So let's, instead of making it that big, let's make it so that it kind of goes out like this. And that way, when we add the foreground to transparent thing, the gradient, I mean. Very nice, okay. Let me just use a soft erase on part of this whole section. It's a little bit aggro. What about something like this? It's a little bit less intense, I think. I think that fits well. No, not quite though. Maybe something like this? What we need then is a much darker, hang on, just for this area over here, going to, from left to right, we would need another gradient. Like that, yes, okay. And then just like this for the cloak. What is that? Hang on, that looks a little odd. There we go. Let's try that again. Okay, we'll use this and yeah, just like that basically. Okay, then over here, what we can do actually, before we move on, is just, again, add a super small clear part here. And then, like this. And again, we're just going to do a really quick thing where we're going to bring in a gradient from the left to right over here. There we go. Looking clean. Okay, grab this. Same deal once again. Okay, remove this little bit here. I feel like for this one, this little section here is like picking out the fish bones from your meal. There we go. Lovely. Okay, so what we're going to do real quick, actually, is something that I didn't realize while I was filling in the base layer, and that's that these bits here should be metal, because they're for the dagger that's right there. I feel like those should be metal. But that's easily fixed. And more even easily shaded. Perfect. See, that was so easy. That was super fun and easy to do. And it did not have any major incident, and it was not stressful, and I had no doubt in my mind whatsoever that I was able to do it. I will, however, need to borrow some of the darker colors for the metal down here. Okay. Right, the pommel. No, wait, the pommel's the one that I just did. The crossguard. I'm encouraged to know more about swords than I should, but not enough to be useful. I'm like one of those amateur birders trying to talk to like a trained ornithologist, you know? Like I vaguely understand what they're saying and I can try to keep up, but it's very clear that I like don't know super deep about like what each part does or what it's supposed to do. Like I was obsessed with swords as a child, and then like at some point I lost that fire and became obsessed with martial arts instead. Martial arts unrelated to swords, mind you. And then it just kind of started drifting off, but some of it still remains. Some of it still appears from time to time, like some kind of strange ghost. Okay, and then similarly for this part, we're just going to use that color. Okay, perfect. Okay, we can do the glove too, why not? Oh, hell no. Get the fuck out of here. Get this robot out of my chat. /ban at Panda Zoc. That's not a username. That's some shit that they call, that the Xeon army calls their Gundams. That the Xeon army calls their mobile weapons platforms. I will say something that disturbing might not be the right word. Something that I feel like I'm not getting a huge kick out of recently is that people have been starting using... And I'm gonna need you all to bear with me here while I explain this if you're not familiar with the whole thing already. people have started using clanker as a slur for robots. And while I can appreciate the absurdity of the situation, I always feel a little bit weird whenever that happens. It's also extremely funny to me that it came from the fucking Star Wars cartoon. But yeah. Let's see. Okay, let's try and... use this. Okay, that looks good. Okay, I think that's that hand done. I do think I need a slightly less intense shading color for some of these, though. Like that. Yeah, like that's still very recognizably supposed to be shadow. Me when I'm discussing art critique for my Sonic fan club. I think I should use a slightly bigger soft eraser for this. And then... okay, that seems pretty good. We can even add a little bit of a highlight here, I think. I think it's worth trying. Maybe just a little less than that. So maybe like less luminous, but more saturated? No, that's a little bit... it looks odd. So maybe less luminous, slightly more saturation, but pivoted towards... yes? I mean, that looks better to me. Okay. Let's leave it at that for now. Let's move on to something else real quick, just so we maintain good pace. You can also add a little bit of that to some of the other parts here. Something like that seems good. Right. I was looking for a darker color to paint the glove over here. That doesn't feel quite right. Maybe like this feels better because I feel like the metal has more contrast than the glove right now, which isn't really what I want to go for. Okay. then we're going to use this lighter brown for the shading here. That works also. You know what? I'm fine with that. Although maybe just a little bit of... Yeah, a little bit of that from the side. No, that doesn't look right. Something like that might be better. Okay. Then... same deal here. Okay, get this here, get this here. No, that part blank seems correct. So maybe just a little bit of lighter color for this one. And then we can use the bright white for the part here. That feels right. Okay, and the darker metal color for this part here. Definitely a nice thick slice of shade back here. Okay, and then this is gonna go like this. Yeah, that looks good. Okay, then we'll continue onward this way. I feel like I'm skipping steps ahead by moving on to the sword this quickly. But it's fine, it's working. I'm keeping a good flow. If it works, it works. I will say though, maybe the gouache brush for some of the detail on the sword metal. Like there has to be, if I lower the opacity on this a little bit, I should be able to like get a slight highlight color here. Yeah, like that. Slightly darker color for the base of these would also be helpful. Okay. Okay. And I think what we can do here is we can actually replace the pure white from the blade underneath with this slightly less... with this slightly more saturated, clearer color. Let's do a little back and forth here. I like that. I kind of like how it's coming along, but I do feel like it needs to be a little less saturated here. Yes, okay. Maybe a different hue? Ooh, the blue is kind of speaking to me, but... Nah, I think just doing a slightly dark, more intense red is the right call here. And for this one, it's almost going to be the opposite, where we do still have the shading to do, but we break it up with, like, light. Okay, and then bring this outward from here. Okay, then we blend these out a little bit. Nice. All right. And then in this part here for the middle, we can just kind of go ham with a nice kind of diagonal cut of different colors. Something about this doesn't seem right. No, I think I think I'm not wrong here, but I do need to add, hang on. I do think I need to use the blending mode. No, no, no. That's not, this isn't right. Huh. Actually, hang on. I think where I might have been steering myself wrong is to not have a darker color here for the base, and then a little bit further up ahead. Just using these. Actually, that might be a good point. I might be doing the diagonal wrong, and that's just messing up the flow of everything. Like, if I just blend this part here out, right? No, no, that's not right. Okay, and then over here. And then maybe with the soft brush? Question mark? No, I think the issue is that I'm going for too many hard edges. I think if I just blend these two out, it's going to make more sense. Oh yeah, look at that. Okay, and then I just need to do the inner groove correctly, and then we'll have this clutched. And that's easy enough to do because we just need to... like that. And then it's just kind of like a mini version of what's going on outside on the edges and such. We just need to... first of all, we need to add a slightly darker shade through the gradient here. I think. This sounds right. And then for these sections out here, I'm just going to add a small gradient. Like that. And then again up here. And what I think is really going to seal the deal is I think I'm just going to go one bit of shade deeper, and I'm going to just outline this shadow. Because I think that's really going to be what kind of indicates, oh yeah, this is supposed to be like a groove in the middle of the sword. Okay, and then over here, it's going to keep going like this. Nice, alright. I think that should be sufficient for that part. We can move on. Okay, and then this part here is gonna just add that little bit of an opening there. Okay. That's most of the metal done. I think the main parts left are the shoulder pads, helmets, and the greaves. So let's do the shoulder pad first. I feel like that's just gonna be the easiest. Okay. Okay, then we're gonna just add a gradient here to have a little bit of variety in the texture of the color. I don't think that's a real thing, but play along. Occasionally I just don't know the technical terms for some of the stuff that I'm doing, so I just try to approximate it as best as I can with non-technical terms. And to my credit, it works out most of the time. I'm concerned a little bit that a lot of people seem to tell me that I have a very convincing voice, where, like, if it's not completely obvious that I'm bullshitting somebody, they occasionally tend to believe what I'm saying, even though I'm trying to make it sound like it's not true. So I think as long as I have enough panache, I can get away with pretty much abusing any kind of art terminology. You know, assuming fucking Vincent van Gogh reincarnated themselves aren't parting around in my chat. And even then, I bet I could probably get away with a fair amount. It's not a capacity I tend to abuse too often. The worst part is sometimes I do just say things that are wrong. And that is the part where I feel like, okay, that was a bit of a bummer. Let's cool it down for a second. I feel like it'll be the kind of part where like dogs play, where like they need to like do the play bow again or like show their belly to be like, hey, it's okay, we're still just playing. Are you not hurt? It's important to understand other people's bullshit tolerance when you're talking to them. Some people have like a heroically high one, and in fact, you're the one that has to kind of keep up. But other people have a very low one, and you need to be very gentle with them, or else you're going to have them believing that like the moon landing was faked or some shit. Okay. And actually, you know what I do think would help, actually? You know what? I'm gonna go for it. I'm gonna do a couple of quick slashes with the melee brush. I think that's gonna really bring it up. Sure, okay. Or maybe actually just the wash brush might be beneficial for this. Have to keep that on an even pace. Yeah, that looks pretty good. Alright, next up is the greaves. I'm glad that I have the gauntlet here all figured out, because that has been a huge help in figuring out the correct approach for a lot of these. Okay. Then we're going to shrink this one down. Not by 30, maybe more like by 5. Yeah, that seems pretty good. And then we're going to use the gradient to kind of just... yeah, do that, basically. Okay, and this is going to have a slight bit of shine to it. Nice. All right. Okay. Got it. The other day I actually watched a YouTube video. This YouTuber who I had never heard of before in my life got on my recommended feed. And it was about him trying to get top 100 in a game called Straftad, I think it was called. Very simple 1v1 arena shooter. And it was kind of incredible because even though the game had a very small community, relatively speaking, the game also had, like, there were enough people active for him to be able to reliably climb up the ranks, but also, two, for him to actually develop, like, a nemesis type rival with this guy called, like, I forget his name, actually. Or wait, no, I remember his name, Vestige Boy. And I don't know, I think that's kind of awesome. I don't know, I do find it very heartwarming, I guess would be the right term, whenever somebody manages to make a genuine connection like that over the internet. Right? Like, it's unlikely to happen for most of us. In fact, I would say for the majority of us, it's unlikely to happen at all. But I do think it is fabulous that some people can form those genuine emotional connections through the web. I don't know. Seeing it happen for other people can give you hope that it can happen for you too. I'm confident that all of my relationships are going to be found offline, but you know, it's nice to imagine that it is possible that it can save your life like that. Also, I'm going crazy hard on some of the shading. I don't know. I'm very proud of myself for my metal shading. I think this is coming along very nicely. I've said it before and I'll say it again. You should be allowed to brag a little bit whenever you feel like things are going right. I don't know. I feel like a lot of there was this, I talked a long time ago now. I think it must have been like almost a month and a half now. About this paper that I read about like glam rock versus grunge and how the latter ended up kind of putting the last few coffin nails in the former. And a lot of that discussed how a lot of the more accepted like masculinity, quote unquote masculinity in rock music is believed to be attributed to that sort of authenticity, you know, the kind of idea that it's not a performance, it is like the singer speaking to you to some extent. Like it's a little bit improvised, it's a little bit unplanned, but all the same, it is technically magnificent. And I don't know, I think about that and how it might relate to how much people relate to streamers and stuff. Because again, this is a hobby that's now taking like a lot of my mental space, I guess would be the term. So I a lot of the times when I read something, I'm like, my brain goes, how can we relate this back to YouTubing and VTubing and streaming and whatnot? Not sure how much of a benefit that is just yet. I think it is a little bit of a detriment so far, but at least it gives me fascinating things to discuss and parallels to draw for myself. But yeah, you think a lot about like how some people praise a lot of others' talents for comedic timing or their ability to like set up a joke, but at the same time, there's a lot of space to appreciate the performances as well, right? Like a lot due to just kind of like how VTubing as a whole was formed. There's a sort of expectation might not be the right word, but overwhelming overlap with activities normally associated with idol singers. And you have to wonder to what extent that has created both something fresh for like a Western audience, because you know they're not familiar with idol culture. They don't know much about it, but to them, because it's related to this thing that they like, it's, instead of it being like scary and something to look down upon for a lot of them, it is something that is exciting, and you know they get to see a lot of the benefit and fun in it, rather than, you know, I mean, a little bit of a column A, a little bit of column B. I do feel like more recently people have become aware of like the kind of dark side and evil aspects of that same idol culture. Not to say that it's all bad, but it does have a lot of its negatives kind of come to the forefront whenever it's practiced, right? So it usually takes a lot of careful management for that not to happen, which isn't always the case. It's not always done properly. Okay, maybe like this. And I might just make this whole other leg like the darker metal color. What I might do actually as well is just... Hang on. I see the vision for something very important here, so I'm just going to go ahead and do that. Okay, and then I'm just going to cut this off right here. Perfect. Okay, we can use that, and then... this part here, we can use the gradient erase to create the light spot. Okay, and then like this. Perfect. Maybe we can even do a little bit of the light here. Okay. We're going to go one shade darker for some of this part, for a little bit of this. Sort of like this? Yeah, that seems about right. Okay, and then just a little bit of a darker shade here. A little bit here, and definitely here. I thought the greaves would be way harder to do. What the hell? I'm just that good. Oh yeah, I was talking about like that whole humility thing and like the way that it kind of is connected with the idea of authenticity. It does make me wonder if that to some extent is why it's so common to see, you know, people who do VTubing as a hobby try to like brand themselves as like, oh yeah, I'm a little bit of a doofus, I'm a little bit of a silly Billy, I forget stuff, I'm not too bright. I do wonder if that is the case. If that is the case, it could also be with like some biases towards like the genders of the people involved. How, you know, there might be it might be presented as an endearing quality based on, you know, what people expect from each gender. And that feels very awful to say, and I do feel like I should be wearing a tinfoil hat wearing it, but I do think it does bear discussing a little bit. I don't know. Sometimes it does just feel like you need to kick around ideas in your head and kind of try to digest them a little bit. However, I don't think, at the same time, it doesn't... ruminating on the issues in a space doesn't always produce solutions to those issues. You know, you have to... just thinking about a problem really hard isn't gonna save you. It isn't gonna show you a way out. Well, as with a lot of things, the best you can do is try and do what you can to not be a part of the problem. Okay. Yeah, I don't have the full eloquent preparation of like my full thoughts on that subject prepared at the moment. I don't have the PowerPoint slides ready. So I think I'm going to leave it at that for now. Maybe someday. Okay, we're going to shrink this down by like 5 pixels, and then we're going to Nope, that's not the right thing. There we go. God, because I haven't shaded the head, it looks so spectacularly bald compared to the rest of the whole thing. I also need to shade the skirt and everything. Okay, let's hustle a little bit, yeah? Okay, and... Huh, interesting. Let me try something real quick, actually. Okay, then over here. I need like a highlight color. It's a good thing I figured that out with the glove there. Okay, and then just create a consistent thing here for where the arm should go, and then over here for the little scrap of cloth there, and I think that's good. We're done with that little part of the belt. Okay, then over here. Oh yeah, come to think of it, I haven't shaded this part, have I? Let's fix that. Okay. Oh, actually, while we're here, let me just do the little cloth bit up here first. Sometimes I really have to wonder if I'm all right in the head. I just color picked the exact same color. I saw that the color wheel didn't move, and yet I still tried to use it to shade a darker area. Perhaps I lack sleep. No, actually, come to think of it, I've actually been on a pretty good run of, like, getting decent amounts of sleep. Although, whether I wake up at a good time is debatable. There must be a balance that could be struck. It must be possible. Okay, and then this is gonna come in like this. And then use a soft eraser to just kind of melt that together. Lovely. Okay, I think the only parts left are the kind of red rags here and the helmet. Let's do the helmet first, because I feel like the kind of cloak and everything else, it's going to be fairly easy to do once we have that in order. Okay, so this part is going to be the darker side. Okay, and then we are going to just grab this whole part here. Just, okay, first of all, we need to add a significant, like, part here, and then we're going to add somewhere over here. But for that part, we're actually going to use the soft eraser tool to undo most of it. That's looking pretty good. Okay. Similar thing, but in the opposite direction for this side. Maybe more dramatic. Maybe with the brush pen? Oh yeah, that looks pretty sick. Okay, and then we're going to use more or less the same tactic for the faceplate here. Then this part here is actually gonna kind of come on like, nah, that looks a little bit strange. Let's leave it like that, but just emphasize the highlights down here so that it's still very clearly, there's supposed to be like a divot there. Okay, and that's gonna come up like this, and then like this. Something to be said that even though knights have so much metal shading on them to do, figuring out like what they're up to at any given moment is surprisingly easy. Because, you know those guys are either swinging around some kind of medieval weapon of some persuasion, or on a horse, or like drinking out of a tankard. Knights have very predictable day-to-day activities, broadly speaking. They're kind of like cats in that regard. You know, like you can typically find a cat like playing with something random or like napping in the sun. For knights, it's basically the same deal, except instead of napping in the sun, they're like hitting each other with practice sticks. Okay, just increase this. And maybe add a slightly darker shade. The problem with this one is that it's a little bit desaturated, so I kind of want something with a little bit more punch to it. Alright, nice. And then we just need to do this back part here, and that's easy enough to figure out. Just gotta do this, and a little bit of this, to kind of show where it curves out. And then for the highlight... Or actually, you know what I think might help here? I'm a little bit dissatisfied with leaving these as is, so maybe if we just blend them out like that. Yes, okay, we are in business. Let me try doing that for most of this. I don't know, like the scratchy hatching feels correct, but there's something very unsatisfying about leaving it like that. So at least for some of it, I want to blend it out a little bit. No, that doesn't look better. I mean, maybe just for this section it does. Like, yeah, we can leave it blunted for that part. I don't think that's going to be a huge issue. Maybe just for this bit too. There we go. Okay, and then right here, we're gonna do it like this. Nice. Okay. I think that's good for the helmet. I think just for the mouthguard, we need to add a little bit of a gradient here. And we can use that to create more depth within the helmet. This is supposed to be a haunted suit of armor, allegedly. Okay, now we just need to figure out the cape and such, and I'm just gonna stretch my wrists a little bit. I feel like I kind of underestimated a lot of the processing time for this one. I think we really did, in fact, lose a lot of time just trying to figure out what was wrong with the pose, because we essentially did it twice, didn't we? There's some efficiencies to be gained from that. But that rice is already cooked. We'll just move forward as is. Okay, and then... Or actually, the helmet would be more or less kind of shading this whole area here, wouldn't it? Okay. Or actually a little bit of this can have some light on it. I think otherwise it'll be difficult to distinguish it from the backside over there. Okay, then over here. Good grief. Huh. Had to fight off a yawn there. It is getting rather late. But I think we have enough gas in the tank to finish this one before we head out. So let's just do that and then I'll peacefully head to bed. Okay, and then... this is gonna kind of come in like this. Wait, no. Other way around. No, wait. Hang on. I've almost got it. Okay, yep. Okay, now we're in business. Okay, and that's gonna come out like this. Oh yeah, that's looking clean. Might have to add a couple of little light bits here. So that's just gonna come in like... yeah, I think just a little bit here and there is fine. I actually think I might not have gone dramatic enough with the the lighter parts. So maybe what I can do is I can use the brush to, just a very a fine brush to kind of go over the lighter sections here. Okay. Actually, I need a couple of little fragments of the light right here. Now, we need to find a darker color than this for the red that I'm hoping to use. Yep, like that. There we go. Maybe a little bit more dramatic than that. Yeah, that seems much more appropriate. Okay, just gonna grab these parts here and hit them with a gradient. Gonna do that for this part too. And then we're gonna do something very similar to the section down here. Okay, and then... Perfect. Oh shoot, I forgot to shape this section of the belt. Oh, dang it. Alright, easily recovered though. No skin off of my non-existent nose. I did kind of fuck up my whole life by not giving myself a nose when when I was kind of like spawned into existence. I mean, the sun really messed that up because like noses are kind of vital if you come to think about it. Like, yeah, I have some slight advantages over by not having one, but like at the same time, like, well, what the hell were we thinking? We gotta set up, like, you remember Spore? You remember how Spore had, like, a minimum complexity limit? How, like, you needed to have a minimum of, like, a mouth and at least, like, one limb for your creature to exist? And even that, the limb was kind of debatable since you could just, like, leave them limbless and they would just, like, float around in their merry way. That was really funny. Why did they let you do that? I mean, granted, the floating was, from what I recall, fairly slow. But all the same, why the hell did they let you do that? Like, you're not even gonna give this thing one leg? Not even gonna give it, like, a pair of legs? You're not even gonna kiwify it? That's fucked up. Well, no. Kiwis have more than two legs. It's just, like, it's very difficult to detect their wings, given the fact that they're itty-bitty little tiny things at the side of their body. All the same. Feels a little bit like poor foresight. Well, to be fair, and this is something that I've been learning a lot from, like, that Ultima retrospective series that I've been watching. A lot of, like, these games which emphasize emergent gameplay and basically don't really focus on having a story, don't really railroad you as much. A lot of their strength comes from just having a very robust system. And to some extent, you can't have a robust system if you're trying to... You can't have both a very robust system and, like, a lot of player freedom. And I think this was one of those compromises to kind of enable the player freedom but retain the robustness of the system. I was doing the... I keep trying to not call it a skirt. It looks like a skirt. It is, for most intents and purposes, a skirt. It's not under the original... No, I mean, what would you even call that? Like a waistcloth? That sounds like very aprony, and I don't think that's like the right vibe. Waistcloth doesn't really do it justice. Waist cape? I'll have to ruminate on that. Skirt also feels wrong, though, because I feel like skirt has a very specific implication for what it looks like. Like, calling it a skirt is reductive. Okay, then over here, we're gonna go like this. Wrong way around. Just gotta... There we go. Let me just select this part so I can thoroughly... just put everything like this without needing to worry about the brown on the hands. And now we can just kind of shade at our leisure, to be quite honest. I don't think there's anything that is particularly mission critical about this. Although I do need to remember to add the cursed red eye. And we can even add a couple of like flecks of like super bright red here. I get that it's probably supposed to be a much rougher texture than this, but I think it looks pretty. And that kind of takes priority. Okay, next up is the Cursed Red Eye, and that's very easy to do because I kind of just need a couple of things. So first up, I will need the actual color for the red eye. Next up, I will need the wash brush. And I just need to... Actually, I can probably use a slightly... Hang on, so that's like pure red, pure red. We're gonna go a couple of things deeper first. And it is the left eye, right? Yep. And what we're gonna do is we're just gonna... First of all, we're gonna trim a couple of these parts here. Okay, that's gonna come up like... like that. But then we're gonna do one step further. And we're also... First of all, we need to make the base of it thicker, because otherwise it'll look like it doesn't taper off at all. And that just looks a little clunky. We can do a little bit of a taper right here. We can do a little bit of a taper. Me when I'm designing Nimmy Nightmare's chibi form. I will say, for as awesome as her final maximized design is, I really have a soft spot for like the cartoony little tapir creature that she uses from time to time. Okay, and then what we're also going to do is we're going to use the blur tool to blur this part out as it comes out. Or actually, you know what? I'm going to use the motion blur. Just one direction. And I'm going to need to figure out which way this thing is supposed to point. Something like that. Maybe lower strength. No, that's... Let's try that again. Yeah, like that. Okay, and then we're just going to use the, I guess, multiply brush? Okay, cool. Okay, I think I've got an idea for what the background's gonna be like. So we're gonna go dark brown, darker brown up here. Hang on, let me try this. Wait, no, actually, no, I think I know what I need to do. So let's... Okay. Let's do slightly lighter. It's almost gonna look like a... Hang on. It's almost gonna look like a Pokemon Ruby Sapphire kind of thing. And what we're going to do here is we're actually going to use a kneaded eraser to kind of erase the... No, actually, you know what we should do? Let's not worry about that just yet. What we're going to do is we're actually going to create yet another layer. And here we're actually going to use a much brighter color. Okay. And then back here we're actually going to create... Hang on. Where's the marquee tool? There we go. Okay. We're going to remove the one here on the bottom. Because what we're mainly interested in is creating a darker color in the background here. Especially towards the bottom. And what we could do as well, actually, come to think of it, is we could add a little bit of a shadow right here. And we're actually going to use that same principle over here. So let's add this part here. Hang on, I think there we go. Okay, and then... Let's see how this plays out. Because I kind of want to see what happens if I... Not bad, honestly. I do want to add a little bit of extra darkness on the top corners, just to make it look, again, more like a dungeon encounter. So let's use you. Okay, we're going to use a darker color than what we already have back here. Very closely approaching black, but not quite touching it. And just kind of creating a curve back here. Honestly, that's looking pretty good. I think... Yeah, no, I think I'm going to have to... Unless I move this up just a I mean, honestly, that's looking... Hang on. Let me see what happens if I move this up just a tiny bit. Or a little bit more than that. Okay, yeah, that looks cooler as well. Let's just... Something like this, and perfect. Okay, I think we're good to go. Let me just sign this and we'll be wrapping up for tonight. Hang on. Right here I need to erase this bit here. It just looks messy if it goes over. Alright. Good work, everyone. That one dragged on for much longer than I expected it to. I was not expecting it to take this much out of me. But we're done. All right. Take it easy. Have a good rest of your night, and I will see you all later. Bye.